Back to in the last 10 years, Kenya has made significant steps in ensuring that financial inclusion becomes a reality, and this has been shaped by mobile money. But we still have a lot of challenges when it comes to accessing of funds by SMEs. And so where do we have the bottlenecks and how do we deal with these? Well, I told you that this is BizCheck, and of course our reporters are around the country. We'll be going to them, and of course I will be getting some updates on what's happening, and of course we'll be keeping tabs with our reporter who is in Malindi County, Kilifi County, in the village of Shakahola, where rescue operations is currently underway. Well, we'll be getting in touch with her just to find out how the situation is. I told you that we are live from Broadcasting House. My Twitter handle is at O'Brien Kimani, and at KBC Channel 1 is our Twitter handle. We want to talk about youth unemployment. How do we address the situation? Is the government doing enough to ensure that this crisis is addressed? Tindi Sitati is the collaboration officer at the United States AIDS International and Development. She's joining us here on the set. She understands a thing or two about how to create employment for young people, as well as create models around cooperatives to generate more jobs. Tindi Sitati, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, explain to us what is considered to be unemployment.
Unemployment, according to me, is the aspect of not having a job. So basically not being able to provide for yourself and your family through lack of income, continuous stream of income that is coming to you. So that means you don't have a consistent income that can label you as being employed. Yes.
There is a cadre of people in this country that we call watu wa mjengo. Would they be classified as unemployed? I mean, bearing in mind that they are employed for a short-term period of time, you know, like 1 to 3 months, or sometimes 4 or 5 months.
We would say that those in the Jua Kali sector are employed, self-employment basically. So they have work, but they're not employed separately, but they have work for themselves. Yes.
Would you classify people in the construction industry as as Jua Kali?
It depends. Jua Kali mostly refers to those who work informally. So as we know, the informal sector in Kenya is very big, and this is a sector that is capitalized by people who have not formalized their businesses. So we have a huge number of youth and women who are working informally in Kenya. So when you talk about Jua Kali, we are really looking at people who are working informally. They are working, they are getting income, but they are working informally, and they are very disadvantaged essentially because they are not able to access, for example, the government social security scheme. They are not able to access, for example, issues to do with employment benefits, but they are working and they are getting an income. But in most cases, you find that the income they are getting is not enough to cater for their daily needs.
How bad is the unemployment situation in Kenya?
In Kenya today, unemployment is a huge challenge, especially for youth. We have about 75% of youth in Kenya in terms of the overall population. 40% of this youth, according to the World Bank, are unemployed. And so you can imagine
40%.
40%. So you can imagine if 40% of the youth, we're looking at the future, yet a huge majority of the population is unemployed. They don't have income. So the situation is big, I might say. Yeah.
And so when you talk about 40% of the youth, you're talking about people in which age bracket?
So we're looking at youth between the ages of 18 to 24. So that is where 18 to 24. But generally, the definition of youth is people who are between the ages of 18 to 35. The general definition, yes.
18 to 35.
18 to 35, yes.
But unemployment affects the people who are within the age bracket of 18 to 24?
Yes, so there's that bracket between 18 to 24 that is affected, that forms the 40%. So you can imagine there's this remaining percentage. And I think it's just a research gap. I think if we are to do that research today, we'll find that the rate of unemployment is probably even higher than what we are seeing today. And remember, youth form 70%. We still have other, people who are above 35 that are still affected by unemployment. So this is something that is beyond, what we know how we can look at it. But I think generally, I believe that the cooperatives business model is a model that can actually bridge the gap of unemployment in the country today. As we know, cooperatives go way back to the early 1900s. We had our very first cooperative in the year 1908. And then fast forward to independence, we had about 1,000 cooperatives forming. And then from independence to where we're at today, we have over 20,000 cooperatives that are currently in existence in the country. And these cooperatives have provided employment opportunities to thousands of Kenyans. And so I believe if we focus the right attention and work with the right stakeholders, we can actually use the cooperative business model to provide employment opportunities to these groups.
We shall be digging deep into that concept of cooperatives and see where it fits in today's society, because you're right, as you're saying, the cooperative movement in Kenya is as old as the Republic of Kenya, and it goes back to 1900s, as you are saying. But I just wanted to find out, so that we can put this conversation into context, why are the youth who are within the bracket of 18 to 24 years the most affected? Is it that they are unemployable, or they don't have the core competencies to meet today's job market?
Generally, I don't think they're targeted for unemployment. We just don't have enough jobs in the country. And so we find that we have thousands and thousands of youth who are graduating every year from the university seeking employment, and yet these employment opportunities are not there. They cannot cover this large number of youth. Remember, those who are older have probably managed to find their way through business and other entrepreneurship activities, but those who are just starting up fresh from college are seeking opportunities for employment. And that's why you find that within that gap is where we have more youth who are struggling to get employment and income.
Is the job market ready for these cadre of people?
Absolutely. The job market is ready for anyone who is skilled and ready to make an income and contribute to economic development. I think the question is, do we have enough jobs, to provide for the youth? But I think the job market is ready. I talked about the cooperative sector. There are other sectors. We have the agriculture sector that is doing very well in Kenya. And we have the manufacturing sector. So the opportunities are there. So really, I think it's just providing that enabling environment where youth can actually find jobs and income earning opportunities to make a living.
You see, when you talk to the FKE, or Federation of Kenya Employers, they'll tell you that there is a major mismatch when it comes to the training offered by learning institutions vis-a-vis the jobs that are needed by the market. And companies are ending up spending a lot of money, in training and retraining graduates in the Kenyan market. And so that's why the reason I'm asking you, do you feel or do you believe that the young people or the youth are trained to meet today's job market demands?
I think that is something that is subject to a lot of conversation, but of late we are hearing about skills-based jobs, and that is why there's a lot of conversation around the TVET, where we're looking at how can we utilize technical skills by the youth to provide job opportunities. And I apologize that I will jump back to the cooperative model time and again, because this is a model that has actually proven that it's able to provide opportunities for youth. that these youth are able to use their skills. So we are looking more of skills-based employment, where if I'm an extension officer, I've studied probably extension work in college, and then I get out of college, I provide extension services, training and capacity building to farmers. So I'm utilizing the education I've gotten in college, but I'm also able to get skills out there on how I can improve on this particular work.
When you look at today's world, I mean, the ICT world is becoming like the champion of job creations in terms of self-employment or even corporate employment. And we're having new fields like AI, like Internet of Things, like computer coding and so much. And so, you know, experts are saying that this is the future of work. Are these people, you know, primed for these positions?
Absolutely. I think here in Kenya, compared to other countries in Africa, we have youth that are really, you know, they're exposed to the technical advancements that we have experienced as a nation and as a globe. So I think when it comes to IT, I think in Kenya we've demonstrated that we have the machinery, we have the technology, and we do have youth who are very educated in the sector, very skilled, and are able to provide jobs in that particular sector.
And when you look at you know, the Kenyan market, for example, which areas present the most opportunities that we can tap, you know, to spur employment?
I'll say the cooperative sector.
The cooperative sector.
The cooperative sector. Thousands and thousands of people, and not to count those who are in the agriculture value chains, have been employed through the cooperative sector. I know that there are other sectors that are also providing employment and jobs, but cooperatives have proven to be a tool for economic development and jobs creation in the country. And this is a movement that is controlling 43% of Kenya's GDP. So you can imagine the impact that it has on the youth with regards to job creation.
And when you talk about the cooperative sector, and you know, the sector straddles all the other sectors of the economy. We have cooperatives in the banking industry, we have cooperatives in the agriculture sector, in transport, in aviation, in finance, and so in all these sectors, which field do we have the most opportunities that we can tap to open up a job market for young people?
In Kenya, we started off with agriculture cooperatives. I know that most Kenyans were educated by their parents from proceeds from the agriculture cooperatives membership. And so agriculture cooperatives were very popular during the earlier and former years. But today, you find that we have a diversification of the types of cooperatives in the country. We have the housing cooperatives that are providing home ownership opportunities for members. The housing cooperatives are also providing Kenyans with opportunities to invest in housing. We also have the financial cooperatives that we famously call SACCOs, the savings and credit cooperatives, that are providing Kenyans with an opportunity to get credit and go about their projects. We also have mining cooperatives, marketing cooperatives, and the very new entrant that is called the worker cooperative business model. So I think there's a number of cooperatives that we have today that can actually bridge the gap in employment. And personally, I believe the worker cooperative that promotes the world of work, especially for youth, is a cooperative business model that should essentially be given that attention because it has the opportunity to give work, especially for those who are employed. And for the global communities who are working in Kenya through the CLEAR program that is funded by USAID, they've done a lot of work to advocate for this particular worker cooperative model in the country today. When we go back to 2018, when the program began implementation, nobody knew about worker cooperatives. And so we started off working through education and training to Kenyans about what is a worker cooperative and what are the opportunities that worker cooperatives can provide to bridge the gap of unemployment. And so we met this group of fundis, technicians, painters, plumbers, who came together to as a group and formed the Association of Mafundi in Kenya. And so when we shared with them about the worker cooperative business model, they were very interested, because as an association they were not able to transact, to work, to get income. And so when they transitioned to the worker cooperative model through support from global communities, they were now able to work through a structure that was able to provide opportunities for work for them. And now they're known as Funditech service cooperatives. They're operating here in Kenya, and they're able to negotiate for contracts on behalf of the members, and they're making income. They're improving their lives and that of their families. So we are seeing how the cooperative model can be used to really bridge that gap of employment, especially through worker cooperatives. We also have a group of ladies who are solar engineers who came together to form a worker cooperative for solar installation and training. So you can imagine if these were the same youth we are talking about who graduated and sat back and were waiting for employment, where are the jobs? So through the cooperative model, Kenyans have an opportunity to define work and get work for themselves. So they are able to go and register a worker cooperative and provide labor in return, get the income that they desire. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of work that global communities has done to create awareness around this particular model. We have worked with the government, the State Department of Cooperative. We've also worked with the counties through the Council of Governors to ensure that we have the correct policy and legislation provisions that can actually support the operationalization of worker cooperatives in the country today. So we are also working with the apex organizations like the Cooperative Alliance of Kenya. We are working with the Cooperative University of Kenya, because concerted efforts are required to ensure that such innovations and new models in the cooperative sector can be accepted, so that we can have buy-in, so that we can have more and more Kenyans getting job and getting work through this particular model.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at the government policies in terms of job creation, there has been a lot of emphasis that has gone into spurring the manufacturing sector, where the government plans to increase the contribution of manufacturing to GDP to about 15% by the year 2025. We have also seen a lot of emphasis being given to agro-processing, and all this is aimed at creating more job opportunities. Do you think government policies are aligned when it comes to job creation?
Absolutely. I think we always joke about it and say that Kenya has the best policies. It's not a joke, it's the truth. Mm-hmm. We do have very good policies. I think the challenge comes to when it comes to implementation. So we have very good policies that are on paper, but are we implementing these policies? So I think that should be the conversation, how we can move the policies from paper to actualization with regards to implementation. And when we discover the secret behind that process, I think it will go a long way towards growing the economy.
As non-state actors, how are you then working with the government to help in the making policies a reality?
Mm-hmm. As global communities, we are very keen in looking at issues to do with cooperatives, policies and legislation. As I mentioned earlier, we are in engagement with the State Department of Cooperatives and the counties through leadership and guidance from the Council of Governors. Mm-hmm. And what we are doing currently is we've been looking at the National Cooperatives Policy that is hopefully going to be passed very soon, that will define how cooperatives on the ground work. So there's a lot of work that we are doing in partnership with the counties to support them to formulate and draft cooperative-specific policies for the counties that speak to the needs of the cooperatives on the ground. Remember, cooperatives is a devolved function, so counties have the power and the mandate to actually work on their own cooperatives policies and legislation. So currently we are working with over 20 counties and ensuring that we are supporting them in the drafting and formulation process. We also partnered with Strathmore Business School, where we launched a course on public policy making process, and this course was administered to county cooperative officials to ensure that their skills in public policy are improved and increased. And so after that training that began in 2019, we have quite a number of county officers that are now fully equipped to draft policies that speak to the needs of their counties. So there's a lot of work that has gone through that in partnership with the government and the Council of Governors.
And when you talk about 20 counties, which are these counties, and what are some of the challenges that you have identified in the course of working with these counties?
Right, so we have a number. We are working with Makueni, we are working with Nyeri, we are working with Nairobi, Kiambu County, and Kisumu County, Homa Bay, and we have others that are joining the bandwagon because of the realization that they need to come up strongly towards defining the policies that are required for their cooperatives. So the challenges that the counties are facing are many, especially with regards to leadership, basically not necessarily the counties, but the cooperatives in the counties. Remember, county cooperative officials work to support the cooperatives within their various counties. So cooperatives are going through various challenges to do with leadership, to do with management. Just in the news in the past few years, we've seen how there are management issues that cooperatives are going through that are bringing a lot of wrangles, corruption, the issue of the term limits for leaders. And so all these issues are supposed to be defined and well articulated in the policies to ensure that the cooperatives on the ground are able to operate efficiently. And so those are the issues that are being faced, and we believe that through our work with the counties and the stakeholders on policy, we're able to actually address these challenges.
And you've rightly put it, the cooperative movement has gone through a rough phase because of number one, mismanagement of contributions, number two, evolving technology whereby they're somehow being caught in some sort of a time warp. So how do you make them engines of economic development as well as job creation?
For the CLEAR program within global communities, what we have done is we have a component. One of our objectives is to improve the business performance for cooperatives. Cooperatives are businesses like any other. So when we focus a lot, on the SMEs, we have a lot of organizations, funding that goes to SMEs and MSMEs. We also need to ask ourselves, what about the cooperatives? Currently, we are having youth who are establishing startup cooperatives. Are there stakeholders out there who are looking at how to support these cooperatives because they are businesses? So as a program, we have developed an approach that looks at 5 key areas. That is governance, leadership, management, production, and marketing. And using these 5 key areas, we are providing technical assistance, coaching, mentorship to these young businesses to ensure that they are able to develop their business skills, and also to ensure that they are able to establish businesses that can compete in the market. So we know that for especially startup businesses, they barely survive 6 months into being established. And so we are very keen to ensure that these startup cooperatives that are being formed by youth are adequately supported. We are linking them with financial partners who can be able to provide financing. And generally, we are trying to ensure that as youth get into the cooperatives, because another issue is, do we have youth involved and participating in cooperatives? They say the cooperative sector is an aging movement. So how do we ensure that youth are getting into the movement by supporting them? So we cannot leave them to do this work by themselves. So through our support to the youth, we've seen how they've been able to take up the cooperative business very seriously. We have a youth partner worker cooperative that is in Langata constituency that deals with waste management. Initially, they were operating as a group, and this is a group of between 18 to 35 youth that are aged between 18 to 35. They used to collect waste individually amongst the residents in Langata, and so when they learned about the worker cooperative business model, they were excited about it because they were looking for an opportunity to structure their business so that they can be able to negotiate for contracts and get work. So these youth are in the final stages of actually registering as a worker cooperative, and so we've supported them through registration. We are supporting this same youth through their various business growth stages. It is important because that is in how we are going to reduce the number of businesses that fail in within 6 months. So I think as an organization, we've prioritized the aspect of policy and legislation. We need to have the right provisions that speak to the needs of cooperatives. And that's why it's a continuous process in how we are working with the government and the counties to ensure that these policies are put in place, but also working closely with the youth, walking with them that journey to ensure that the businesses they are establishing are working, especially in the initial stages, so that they can be able to flourish in the future. So those are the two key areas that we have been focusing on as a program.
Do you support them financially to set up their businesses?
No. What we do as a program is we provide technical assistance, and then we link them with financial institutions that actually now provide financing. We believe that sometimes youth might imagine that it is capital they lack, and sometimes when you provide that capital, you find that still they have challenges in the business. So for our organization, we believe that the aspect of training, capacity building and strengthening is very important, because cooperatives are businesses. They should make money. If you're in the business world and you're not making money, what are you doing?
Has this model tried elsewhere?
Yes, the model has been tried in the United States of America and Spain and other countries across the globe. Right.
What has been the success rate?
The success rate, I'll speak about the ability to basically come out of external shocks. For example, when we had COVID-19, a number of cooperatives were reported across the globe to be resilient to this COVID-19 because they were able to pull together and to support each other and to ensure that their businesses are still in operation. And this can only happen through the cooperatives business model. Cooperatives are people-centered enterprises that are owned, controlled, run and managed by members themselves. So across the globe, and even in Kenya, I mean, we did have the cooperatives COVID-19 committee that was established by the State Department of Cooperatives that came through to support cooperatives during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the worker cooperative business model is really something that can, or a business model that can support entrepreneurs be resilient to the external shocks, but also to grow their businesses to the next level.
And you're talking about offering this worker cooperatives, technical support as well as technical know-how on how to manage their businesses. Do you have like some form of follow-through processes of ensuring that they succeed and they flourish, and once they flourish, they remain afloat?
As a program, we are what we do is we use a partnership approach, where when we partner with a cooperative, we walk with them the journey establishing their businesses. We also use what we call the Cooperatives Performance Index Assessment, where we sit down with the cooperative board and identify the challenges that the cooperative is facing, so that in our approach towards provision of technical assistance, we speak to the needs of the cooperatives. We've had partnerships with currently 19 cooperatives in the country, and these cooperatives are across several counties and different sectors of the economy. For the worker cooperatives, we are currently working with 9 of them in Makueni, Nyeri and Nairobi County, and these worker cooperatives are in clean energy, waste management, housing and construction. We also have those in tourism and clean energy, as I mentioned. So we work with them that journey and ensure that they are well equipped and they are ready to flourish. So we don't partner with them, train them and leave them out in the air. No, we are certain, and we acknowledge that the process of supporting startup businesses takes a while. It takes, a period of time. We need to ensure that even those that are joining from the housing cooperative sector are anchored under Apex organizations such as the National NACHU, basically. So we are keen to ensure that these cooperatives flourish at some point. So we spend some adequate time with them in that support.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're in the company of Tindi, and our conversation this morning revolves around creation of jobs for young people through the cooperative model. I was taking you through the numbers, and unemployment in Kenya is estimated to be around 6%. It was worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. The economy has not been growing as fast to create more jobs, because the average economic growth has been about 5.5%. And the World Bank says that for Kenya to generate more job numbers, the economy needs to grow at a rate of 10% annually. And when you look at the Vision 2030, it talks about a growth of 10% all the way through up to the year 2030. We know that for sure we have missed that target in the last 12 years. And the question is, are we going to meet this target in the next 8 years? That's a conversation that we're having here in studio. This is Bischeck, and I told you that we have our reporters in various parts of the country. We'll be going down to the county of Kilifi just to get an update on the Shakahola tragedy. Our reporter there, Juni Karisa, will be linking up with her at some point in this conversation. But for my question today for you is, are you a victim of unemployment? Yeah, how have you been impacted? I want you to share your comment on this question. My Twitter handle is @O'Brien Kimani, @KBC Channel 1. Time now for us to dash to the county of Kilifi and link up with our reporter, Juni Karisa. Let me see whether I can get her on the Super Wall. Juni Karisa, if you can hear me, I know that you have a challenge with the network in Shakahola village. I don't know whether you have succeeded to get us, the latest. Oh, there she is. This is not Shakahola village, definitely. She's going to update us where she is, and I'm sure she has some update for us. Juni Karisa, what's the latest do we know, and what do we know at this point in regard to Shakahola village?
Good morning, O'Brien Kimani. We are in Malindi town today. Right behind me is the Malindi mortuary, and today we are just here to come and comfort and give comfort and just have a talk with some of the relatives that are in search of their loved ones. There is a information desk that has been set up by the Kenya Red Cross. As soon as you make your way inside the mortuary or the morgue, you have to identify yourself to Kenya Red Cross officials. They will take your details of your loved ones. Now, this since yesterday, 314 people were registered, had been registered ever since the exhumation process began 6 days ago. In the morning, the Kenya Red Cross officials tell us that they have received 8 families also just inquiring about their loved ones. It is a scramble of information here in Malindi. People are coming as far as the western part of the country just in search of their loved ones. Many are very traumatized because they don't know what the state of their family is. Either they are dead, some of their relatives are accompanied by their children. So it is a traumatic state of affairs. Many of them do not know what procedure to follow in search of their loved ones. However, just to give a brief summary, everyone who's making their way here, the exhumation process of Shakahola is continuing. As soon as the bodies are exhumed in Shakahola, they are brought back to Malindi. It's about 100 kilometers from here. They are brought here. Once they arrive here, there is a desk that has been set up where the families are reconciling data to ensure that as soon as the DNA process begins, they can be able to reconcile the data. The families can be contacted to come and provide any DNA material so that their loved one can be identified. Before I give you more information, I'm joined by Pastor Boniface. He's accompanying a family from Kitui. They are in search of their relative. Let me just get a brief summary of what transpired. And naelewa, karibu sana Bwana Boniface, naelewa mumekuja hapa kuanzia asubuhi mchungaji na hamjui mwanzie wapi kufikia sasa. Tupatie tu kwa kifupi tu historia, ni nani mnayemtafuta na mumepata usaidizi gani kufikia sasa?
Asante. Wacha niwasalimie. Kwa majina ni Pastor Boniface kutoka Kitui, upande wa Mwingi. Tunatafuta msichana ambaye anaitwa Irene Mavintia ambaye alipotea kuanzia hii mwezi. Alipotea pamoja na watoto wawili, na kutoka asubuhi tuliingia hapa. Tumeenda kwa DCI, tukaenda kwa ofisi ya police, tukapatiwa the OB. Tukaenda kwa Red Cross, tukatumwa hapa mochari ya Malindi. Na kufika hapa tunaendelea kupata the information. Ile kitu bado hatujapata usaidizi wowote, ndio tunaendelea na kushughulika vile tunaweza pata usaidizi.
Kwa kifupi, Ni vipi mlijua kwamba Irene pengine yuko Shakahola? Kilichowafanya nyinyi muweze kudadisi kwamba Irene yupo Shakahola, ni kipi aliwaambia nyinyi kama familia?
Okay, niliongea na yeye last around 2 months ago, na akanipigia simu akaniambia, Pastor, niko kwa shida. Watoto wangu ni wawili na wajakula chakula 3 weeks. Na akaniambia hajuko kazi na hakuna mahali anafanya kazi. Na nikampigia simu nikamwambia tena, kwa sababu yeye mwenyewe hakuwa na simu, alikuwa anaomba mtu ananipigia. So akanipigia nikamwambia hii wiki ikiisha, mimi mwenyewe nitakuja kukutafuta mahali huko nikurudishe kwa mamako. Nilipompigia mara ya pili akapakua mteja. Tukiendelea hivyo aliponipigia tena nikamwambia hiyo kanisa unaenda naona kwangu hainipendezi kabisa. Ninaweza omba sana uweze kurudi nyumbani na uweze kusaidika mahali mamako yuko. Na mimi kama mchungaji nitakushikilia mahali ninaweza. Na kutoka pale ndio nilipiga simu ikakuwa mteja. Tukiendelea nikapata ripoti ya kwamba Shakahola imekuwa na watu wanakufa. Nilipomwambia kuja nyumbani akaniambia akona pasa anaitwa Mackenzie, anajulikana kwa TV. Na ni lazima muombe ruhusa ndio akuje nyumbani. Na nikamwambia hakuna haja uombe mtu ruhusa, kama unakufa na njaa toka na ukuje nyumbani tukulishe. So information ambayo nilipata ni wakati ambapo media waliingia wakashughulika ya kwamba kuna watu wamekufa pale, ndio tulipata ripoti ya kwamba kuna watu wetu walikuwa Shakahola. Mwenyewe ndiye aliniambia kwa mahali kunaitwa Shakahola, na nika record that, although the clip that she recorded for me sina, lakini niliongea na yeye.
Dadake ametuambia kwamba wakiwa pale walikuwa wanaganyiwa vipande vya ardhi na mhubiri huyu. Je, alikuwa amekaa muda gani pale ndani?
Okay, what I know, walikuwa hapa town center. Kanisa ya mchungaji ilikuwa hapa town center. So baadaye ndio aliamua wale waumini akona wao waende huko kwa vichaka kwake, awakatie kila mtu shamba ya 2,200 wajenge. Na wakijenga kakitu tu, si nyumba ya kawaida, ni kitu tu ya kuweka kulala tu. So cha maana zaidi kile naweza sema walikuwa wamengawiwa, lakini vile alikuwa analala na mahali alikuwa analala mimi sijaona nyumba yoyote, lakini alikuwa ananiambia waligawiwa shamba huko.
Poleni sana kwa aliyokufika na natumai mtaweza kumpata akiwa salama. Lakini kama anakuona sasa, ungemwambiaje?
Okay, vile naweza sema kama anaweza tuona. Mimi nimetoka kwao nyumbani, niko na mama yake ako na uchungu sana. Kile naweza msihi sana akuje nyumbani. Aache kuongopa ama atokezee tu kwamba Malindi. Tunamngojea mpaka wakati ambapo atatokezea. Tutangarimika kila kitu mpaka afike nyumbani. Na ninaweza omba kitu kimoja tu kwa nchi yetu ya Kenya. Kwa washirika wote, mimi ni mchungaji. Naweza sema hivi, kila mtu ambaye ananisikia, imizo moja naweza sema tutafute kanisa ambayo inaabudiwa katika roho na kweli, na tuache kuingia mahali kabla hatujajua the spirit ambayo inafanya kazi mahali pale. Na Mungu abariki, na abariki Kenya, abariki rais wetu na wale wengine wote.
It's raining, O'Brien. That is one of the relatives here in search of their kin. It is a traumatic experience. These are the stories that we have been filing for the past week, and everybody is in search of their families and they are disturbed. Right behind me is a mobile morgue that was brought here yesterday. This was what was being waited upon so that the DNA process can commence. What I can update is right now, initially 6 days before the process began, they had earmarked 35 graves for this procedure to start, but they were unable to start that particular process because they had identified mass graves. So what we've been doing, we've been exhuming, the officers have been exhuming bodies from mass graves. Now they have gone back to the 35 individual graves that had been earmarked since the process began, and that is what they will be focusing. Yesterday they went just near the homestead of Pastor Mackenzie. He is center of operations, and from there, that is when they exhumed 8 bodies for belonging to children. So the rains are on us. I will be giving you another update in an hour as we wait for another media brief from Shakahola, 100 kilometers from here, to give you what exactly is transpiring. But for now, Brian, allow me to shelter myself from the rain.
Facing the morning downpour, as you can see, that is our reporter in Kilifi County, Junie Karisa Thay. It's very, very rainy down there, and she has managed to give us a status update on what's the latest in terms of the rescue and recovery of bodies in the expansive Shakahola village, whereby so far 98 bodies have been exhumed. The operation to go around the entire 800 acres of Shakahola land, which belongs to televangelist Pastor Ezekiel. Is it Ezekiel? I've forgotten the name, but anyway. So it is such an arduous task, and police as well as health officials are on the ground trying to ensure that the entire stretch of land is combed, and the people who are stuck there are rescued, and those who have been buried there, they are exhumed. We expect the director of prosecution to press charges against the televangelist. So far, a court order has been granted by a Malindi court to freeze his assets as well as the assets of his associate, and this is expected. And yesterday we saw the director of public prosecution, Nuruddin Haji, saying that once he is prosecuted, all his assets are going to be forfeited to the state. So we expect more update today in the course of the day, and so you all better keep it right here. This is what we do best. This is definitely KBC. We are live from Broadcasting House. Remember, our conversation this morning revolves around job creation through the cooperatives. movement. This is what we've been discussing in the last 50 or so minutes, and we want to go back to this conversation. I told you who is in our company this morning. She knows a thing or two about job creations through the cooperatives model. She has been here and with us throughout the morning. This is Tindi Sitati. She's the officer in charge of collaborations, learning and adaptation excuse me, at USAID. Before I let you go, Tindi, what is the future of this cooperative model in Kenya when it comes to creation of jobs?
Thank you, Brian. And maybe just to clarify that I'm the Collaboration, Learning and Adaptation Officer for the CLEAR program that is implemented by global communities and funded by USAID. I think cooperatives have a very bright future looking ahead. I mean, when we started, we already spoke about the fact that they are controlling 43% of Kenya's GDP. And we also spoke about the fact that they're diversifying. When we started, we had the agriculture cooperatives, and now we have housing, we have mining cooperatives, we have worker cooperatives. So I think the future looks good. However, we need to really address the issue of youth and women inclusion, especially when it comes to cooperatives. Women are facing quite a number of challenges to do with gender stereotyping, where the society has placed their home to be, their work to be, to take care of their families and not to participate in economic development. There's also a lot of expectation that women are not supposed to own land, yet we all know that land ownership is very important. It is a key towards accessing financing for businesses, and because women are unable to own this land, they're not able to participate in cooperatives. Youth also need to engage in cooperatives. I think as a country, if we look at the numbers that we have for youth, 75% is huge. And so if we're not thinking about how we are going to provide economic activities for this youth, then this success for the cooperative movement might not go any further. So I think as at where we're at as an organization, we are speeding and continuing up our work with the counties, the Council of Governors, and the State Department of Cooperatives to ensure that we have the policy and legislation provisions for worker cooperatives, and that we continue to support counties to establish their cooperatives specific policies and legislation. I think that will go a long way towards describing and defining the future of cooperatives in the country. And as I conclude, I think we also need to look at issues to do with management. We've talked about the challenges that cooperatives are facing, and also issues to do with market access. We have the latest worker cooperative that was formed in Nyeri County. It's called the Kenya Guides and Porters Safari, and this is a tourism cooperative essentially. So we are seeing more and more diversification of these cooperatives, especially by youth, but we need to start asking ourselves, how can we create markets for the cooperatives that are up and coming? So if we address these issues, I believe that we'll move from, Kenya is currently leading in Africa in the cooperative sector, and we are ranked 7th globally. So I think if we look at these issues to do with policy and legislation, market access, management, then we might just move from position 7 to position 1 globally.
And of course, as you're saying, I mean, there's some challenges that we need to deal with, what you would call systemic challenges within the cooperatives movement, and one of them is the adoption of technology in the industry, as well as entrenching proper management of the cooperatives. And then the other thing, before I let you go, because I can see time is very well spent. Look, you see, the average age of a cooperative member in Kenya is about 55 years. 75% of the Kenyan population is aged between 18 years to 35 years. And so then the challenge comes, then how do you make the cooperative movement attractive enough for the younger generations to join?
And that's a very important question. And in our interactions with the youth, we learned that we need to sit with the youth, discuss with them about their needs for business and in the world of work. And that is why this is a situation that we are trying to address through the worker cooperative business model. Youth in Kenya are very vibrant, they are very innovative, they are very dynamic, and so we believe that preparing or presenting this worker cooperative model to them will actually give them an opportunity to establish work for themselves. We need them in the cooperative sector, and but so far we are not getting the responses we are getting and the active participation that we are, but in our partnerships with the cooperatives, we are trying to understand what initiatives are existing within the cooperatives to ensure that they are onboarding youth as members. So this is something that we are really looking at as an organization, but top on the list is the worker cooperative business model. I believe that this model has a very huge opportunity to transform the world of work for the youth. We don't want youth to get lost in the informal sector. We want them to establish businesses that are formalized, that are working within the laws of the country, and I believe that utilizing the cooperative business model can actually be the solution towards ensuring that youth are getting employment, but they're also involving and engaging themselves more within the cooperative sector.
Very good. Tindi Sitati, thank you for your time this morning, and of course we look forward to have you again in the future.
Thank you.
Asante for your insight. Well, our conversation this morning has been around the creation of jobs for young people using the cooperatives model. You have heard it from Tindi Sitati. She's an expert on cooperatives, and she was sharing with us, some insights on how, we can tap the cooperatives to create jobs in this country. And we went through some very interesting numbers here, whereby the most affected in the unemployment world are people between the ages of 18 to 25. The question is why? And these are the people that are just graduating from universities and leaving learning institutions. And so we need to rethink our business and our job creation model so that we can ensure, or we ensure, that we are well primed for the job market. Well, the second segment of this check is coming up next. We want to look at financial inclusion. Why do we still have so many SMEs unable to access credit in a country that boasts of about almost 90% financial access? Well, that's a conversation we shall be having next. And I also want to update myself. Pastor Paul Mackenzie is the one at the center of the Shakahola tragedy. I was confusing with Ezekiel Odera. Let me ensure that I got the name right. Yes, Odero. He was questioned this morning by police in regard to his church, and the name of the church is called Mavueni Mega Church, which is also based in Kilifi County. Let's stay right here.
So, wewe unaweza filaje ukitoa majina kama hayo?
Aje sasa na mimi hata si ati mmoja wewe.
Wewe si? Malizia wewe si?
Utaifanya.
Huyo jamaa shikisi.
Labda commission, naendelea kumpigia, eventually lazima atashika.
Relax. Itakuwa sawa. Lolo itakuwa sawa.
You and I are over. Because I am not the woman who will make you happy. I'm not that woman.
That if someday you finally understand that the one and only way for you to be happy is to be with me. Because I do love you, Fabiola. You know where you can find me.
Yes, I know you hate me, but I also know you love me. And if you weigh your feelings, you'll know which one is going to make you happy. But when that day comes, when you finally realize what's true, I'm not yet tired waiting for you.
Alafu akainama, akasikiza tumbo yangu, akagonga gonga, akasema ni sindano.
You said that I inject that indopicins. Yes, indopicins, ndio?
Epidural.
Epidural. Wewe wacha mchezo pana. Mimi na matawa naingililia wapi na mimi mwenyewe ni cleaner.
Sasa
uende wapi?
Unaamshwa uende wapi?
Unaona na yeye.
Kutunga hiyo pande nyingine uandike kabisa. Yes, analetea ujinga kwa nini?
Sasa wewe mwenyewe una conclude you are lying, okay?
No, I'm just
Yes, you have agreed that you are lying.
So what?
Allah.
No. Ni ngumu.
Sasa mzee, si uongee lugha ya taifa ambayo unaielewa.
And we live in that time, and I believe the clock is ticking very fast, and this could be the symptoms and the signs of the close of the age.
The way our laws work is there is written law, okay, and then there's a law of precedent. Precedent means if you are in the High Court and the Court of Appeal has made a decision concerning something that faces you in the High Court, you are bound by the decision of the Superior Court.
And as gatekeepers, we want to make sure the family unit is protected. Because when the family unit is messed up, the society is messed up, the church is messed up, there is no posterity.
Our arts and entertainment industry has evolved over the years.
It is at such times that our destinies are written. Will we rise up in courage or die in cowardice?
Who are the movers and shakers in film and theatre? Get trendy as we review locally produced films and stage drama every Wednesday at 9 p.m. on Cinemas and Theatre.
Brought to you by the Kenya Film Commission. Film Kenya, Capture Africa.
I have played chess for a few years now. Chess is a game of building your prediction skills on what someone else will do. It's also a game of thinking and a game of having a clear target in mind.
Have you ever been sick, or someone you know, someone close to you, been sick and had to go to the hospital, and maybe even got to spend a few days at the hospital? Because that is exactly what happened to one of the characters in our book.
I'm back again with yet another recipe, and I know that you guys will love it. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make the yummiest red velvet cupcakes at the comfort of your home.
Let me take a look. Oh Lord, no one tell the girls in the whole world. I know what I'm doing is so wrong. Cause this no man can focus. She said she know me got a girlfriend, and so what? What if I?
I think I'll hold on to this.
Did you know that? Hey, babe. Guys, we will have to resume. Unfortunately, everyone knows.
Are you kidding me right now?
Sorry, I can explain.
Masomo ingekuwa mzuri, sasa ingekuwa natafuta kazi kwa ofisi.
Sema tu ulikuwa nafagia church. Gani hiyo?
Apostle of Savior.
Ile iko town?
Ya Buru.
I showed him.
Please make sure Nick doesn't see.
For now.
Don't let him know that I know.
He means well for the company. You don't need to chase your workers out.
That's none of your business.
At KBC Channel 1, we put people at the heart of events with our captivating weekly news features. Every day, we are breaking new grounds with informative, entertaining, and inspiring human interest stories. On Mondays, 9 p.m., we have The Cabinets. Tuesday, 9 p.m., we get inside the barracks for military tales. We delve in the world of cinemas and theater each Wednesday night. For the young and industrious, make a date with us every Thursday at 9 p.m. Fridays are dedicated for my culture. On Saturdays, we go back in time for history in perspective. And on Sundays, we get to know the process of how things are done and made. KBC Channel 1 News features a whole lot of wonderful viewing experience.
Welcome back. You're watching Bits Check live from Broadcasting House, where we have real conversations around how to drive the economy. In the last 1 hour, we've been having a conversation around job creations through the cooperatives model, and there are some low-hanging fruits that we can pick from this industry. And of course, one of them is the fact that it is one of the most progressive in Africa. It has been with us for the last 180 years. It is the 7th biggest in the world. It's the biggest in Africa. And in Kenya, it employs more than 3.5 million people. And so the question is, how do we use the cooperatives to double this number? Well, time now to shift another focus and now talk about financial inclusion. Well, when you look at the last 15 years, Kenya has made tremendous steps in ensuring that the unbanked have access to financial services. And this has been achieved through multiple platforms. And one of them, which has been the most successful and which has been studied by the world over, including by Stanford University in the US, is the mobile money platforms. It's a model that started way back in 2007. It is now a mega economic enabler. The other model is around the SMEs. If I can give you some data, SMEs, they account for about 98% of all jobs in the country. Their contribution to the Kenyan economy is about 25%. And so this is what you call a critical mass, a critical segment that cannot be ignored. And so the question is, how do you move the SME sector from their contribution to GDP of 25% to about 50% in the next 10 years, which is possible? And how do you make it easy for SMEs to access credit? Well, I'm talking to Kim Kariuki. He is a consultant with Microsave Consultancy, and he's going to help us with some ideas on how these can be achieved. Kariuki, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Very good. First of all, why is it so hard for SMEs to access financing in Kenya?
Good question. I think it was really hard initially because MSMEs were misunderstood. So you talked about M-Pesa as we were beginning this, and you know the true one of the true drivers of M-Pesa was just understanding the value proposition, understanding why it is important for Kenyans to send money to each other, why it is important to ensure that internal remittances remain consistent and grow over time. And I think if we could apply the same level of innovation and product focus onto MSMEs, then we find a shift in how SMEs are being served. So initially we couldn't understand MSMEs because we didn't have a good sense of who is the SME. Are they likely to collapse? Are they dealing in illicit trade? We don't quite understand. If we don't understand, it's harder for the financial institutions to come in and accelerate their activity. But now over time, with the advancements in innovation, with the advent of digital technology, it's becoming easier to connect with the SMEs, to appraise the SMEs, to disburse loans to the SMEs. So now I think the narrative has shifted. We're seeing more SMEs engaging with different platforms by the public and the private sector.
And the most interesting thing is the fact that, just credit to SMEs is not a challenge, not only here in Kenya, but the world over, because when you look at the United Kingdom last year, for example, their lending to SMEs fell by 14 billion pounds in the last 1 year. That's a significant number. And so why are SMEs considered to be at risk by financial institutions?
One, we don't quite understand who the SME is, what's driving the SME. There's a study by CGAP, and it showed that for us to effectively work with SMEs, we really need to segment them. We need to know what drives them, who they are, what is the aspiration of the SME. So if I give you an example, take your mama mboga, who might be what we call an opportunistic entrepreneur. She started the business because she is trying to supplement her income, because perhaps her husband has an inconsistent income, and so she needs to top up. Her attitude towards business is very different from, say, a young person who is coming into business. He's a hustler. He wants to survive. He wants to thrive. He wants to grow. He has ambitious goals and dreams. And sadly, when both of those would approach conventional financial institutions, they'd be told no. But now with digital, it's easier for the financial institutions to find them, to appraise them, to understand them, to know what drives them, and then ultimately to give them credit that can help them grow their business.
And when you say that we do not understand who the SMEs are, what exactly do you mean?
Let me make the point slightly differently. In Kenya today, 2 out of 10 Kenyans are listed at the CRB. So 2 out of 10. So, if we're 10 people here, we can look around and figure out who those 2 are. So those 2 people may be listed for very different reasons. I lost my job, but I had borrowed some money. I haven't been able to repay. I've been blacklisted. I took a loan on behalf of my cousin who wanted to start a business. My cousin was unable to pay. I was repossessed because I was a guarantor of the loan. I'm in that 2%. So a similar thing is happening with MSMEs. Unless we know who's trying to achieve what, where each MSME is trying to go, what sector are they involved in, which value chains are they playing at, it becomes harder for us to design solutions that are targeting MSMEs effectively for them to scale.
And also when it comes to lending to SMEs, when you look at the interest rate charged to SMEs by lending institution, it's significantly higher than to individuals for personal loans. And this is because of their risk profile. And so how then do we address the issues of risk? How do we risk the SME industry in Kenya?
Yeah. So de-risking is a very good question, and it's a top of mind for everyone in government and also private sector and funders. And I think we need to look at it from both sides of the equation. So on the demand side, where these MSMEs lie, like we said, we don't know who they are. We need better tools to appraise them, to understand their income cycles. And digital is helping because we can develop a blueprint of their financial inflows and outflows. We can understand how effective they are at their business, and we can assign them a credit risk. So that's one thing. But I think when you look at the macroeconomics of a country like Kenya, for example, where our dollar is under pressure from increasing rates of increasing inflation, dollar shortages, etc., the dynamics are such that the amount of money that's available for financial institutions to on-lend to SMEs comes at a very costly premium. So unless we look at the scenario on both sides, unless we try and address the supply side and the demand side, we find that our solutions will be half-baked. We can only reduce the cost of the loan to the SME to the level to which we can get to the cost of capital. Digital can help us take it lower, but if I'm already borrowing from an expensive source, then I have to pass the cost along to my consumer. And so we need to address the issue on both sides.
So how do you then rebalance the supply versus demand market to ensure that the cost of credit to SMEs is fair enough?
Sure. Again, now that has different levers. So let's take a country like India that got frustrated with the high cost of lending to agricultural sectors, that it then mandated that any lending that happens to productive sectors has to be done at a minimal interest rate. So that was a very top-down directive that ensured that MSMEs, households that are accessing loans for farming, which is a big mainstay for agriculture, for our economy in Kenya, for example, could access loans at much cheaper rates. So on the one hand, the government has to play a role. On the other hand, the financial institutions also need to do their bit, and there's space for a good number of them to incorporate innovation, so digital lending, credit scoring, etc., to minimize the requirements for loan appraisal. So Tindi, who was just here earlier, talked about the fact that women and young people don't necessarily have collateral, and so they can't borrow if easily or cheaply. But if they can be scored, if we can develop a model that shows how likely somebody is to repay, then we'll bring down that cost of borrowing, and MSMEs will benefit. So I think the government needs to work with the private sector to explore how can we reduce the cost of productive lending, because this is where these MSMEs are playing. India and other countries have done it successfully, even though that was a very top-down directive. Harder to do in private sector-led markets like Kenya and much of East Africa, but it's not impossible. We just need to think about the market dynamics. How do we deliver the credit effectively, and how do we not cause distortions?
So I want you to give us numbers. For example, if 10 SMEs apply for a loan, how many will be successful?
Very good question. We're talking about MSMEs like they're contiguous, so let's break it down. There's a micro, there's a medium, and there's a small. If they're applying digitally, let's say via Hustler Fund or M-Pesa, Fuliza, etc., their chances are pretty good because they've been appraised, they have been scored, they've been assessed. So they may not get a very high limit, but at least they'll get halfway down the line. They'll get enough to start. And we applaud the government's efforts on the Hustler Fund and other similar initiatives that are looking to graduate borrowers. If you look at the small to the macro side of things, those probably will have more to offer financial institutions. Those don't need to rely necessarily on digital, although they're welcome. But they can comfortably approach a tier 2, a tier 1 lending institution and receive a credit facility. They may be more sophisticated, they may have assets, they may have a credit history. So when you look at a number of what the fintechs are doing in this market, it's helping those nano entrepreneurs, helping those small entrepreneurs develop a credit collateral that's digitized, that's based on their repayment patterns, their behavior, so that they can compete with the small and the bigger types of MSMEs.
And the reason why the government is also getting into the credit space is because for the longest time the MSMEs have been the most affected when it comes to lending, and that's why we have facilities like the Hustlers Fund. But is this enough from the government, and should the government get into the business of lending?
Very good question. First off, let's step back and look at what the government's role is. So the government is to facilitate and to enable a private sector market to thrive. We think, though, as well, the government has a space to play if the private sector, if there are inefficiencies, if the government can't make it possible for the private sector to operate, then we're all in trouble. So I think the answer is yes. There's a space for the government to play. I think the government has to play it well. I think the government has to play it in partnership with the financial institutions and the private sector, so as not to crowd them out.
Yeah.
So something like the Hustlers Fund, was timely for different reasons. One, it's a great graduation mechanism for your first-time borrower who's not sophisticated, who doesn't know what they're doing, to get some credit, start doing some business, and scale up. It's also been accepted well by the financial institutions that are supporting it, and others who've come up and said, if you successfully repay your loan via the Hustler Fund, we will absorb you into the more formal market, which is a very positive development. And I think that's what we need to see more of. And I think what we need to do is to support the government and find ways to provide a lot more private sector engagement. So, one of the beauties of, let's take, for example, M-Pesa that you just mentioned a while ago. Initially when M-Pesa was just first started, the ecosystem was fairly closed. Now, I think they saw the beauty of opening it up, and now everyone's integrating it into M-Pesa. So a bank, you can make a bank-to-person transfer. You can pay a merchant. You can do all these extra things riding off the M-Pesa platform, but the M-Pesa platform remains what it is. So I think what we should be thinking about is how do we work with the Hustler Fund or with the mechanisms that the government has set up, the agricultural subsidy program, what have you, to accelerate economic development and development for MSMEs.
Mm-hmm. And so then how do we ensure that, the lending institutions in Kenya stop seeing SMEs as a risk to their business and ensure that there is a balance between ensuring that they take care of their risks, as well as ensuring that SMEs are supplied with the finances that they need?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it's one of those situations where most of the financial institutions, I won't say all, but most of them have at least a portfolio that's lending to SMEs. Now, because they've realized what we're talking about, the 98%, the fact that these MSMEs are with us, they are growing, they're in productive sectors. So most of them are lending to them, but not necessarily with specialized products. So, if you take, let's say, an MSME who is trading in the tea business, it's very few financial institutions that have the leverage to give that MSME enough liquidity to withstand periods where there'll be no revenue. So most of the financial institutions are beginning to make inroads and have been making inroads. The bigger ones who are more capitalized are doing more. But I think it's a place of, also as an MSME, looking at the options, weighing your options, and figuring out which solution, which partner, which financial institution is willing to walk with you down the journey. So we're privileged at Microsafe to work with a number of financial institutions, both in Kenya and outside. And the thing that we get surprised by every single day is the number of financial institutions who have unique programs, accelerator programs, incentive programs, and we see them in the media being published every day. This bank has received this amount of money to support women SMEs, this other institution has done this. So there's a lot that the financial institutions are doing and will continue to do because they see the value case. I think there is a misinformation gap. So MSMEs are not too sure where to go to, and that confounds and complicates the issue as well.
Mm-hmm. And then, so how do MSMEs, fashion themselves to be credit-worthy?
Mm-hmm. So I think part of the work is being done through tech. So we talked about digitization, talked about these fintechs that are helping mama mbogas, everyone digitize and develop a digital footprint. I think as well for the MSME, it's also about appreciating what do you bring to the table. And I think there's a philosophical side of this that says perhaps we should even start at education level. We should start teaching people the fundamentals of business so that when should they come to a place where they want to be entrepreneurs, they know what they're doing. But I think it's also in empowering the MSMEs to really appreciate what they bring to the table. I think we know they exist, but we've somehow conveniently put them to the side. I think in our national psyche, we need to be proud of our SMEs like they are in South Africa and elsewhere. We need to be proud of the fact that we have hustlers. Hustlers shouldn't be, aside from the political connotation, shouldn't be a dirty word that has negative connotations to it. It should be something that we are proud of, because if we are all then have a positive national psyche around our entrepreneurs, then it's going to be a lot easier for us to develop solutions that speak to them.
In the countries that you work with as Microsave, do you have a lending model for SMEs that has worked?
So we don't develop lending models ourselves. We work with partners, and those partners develop their lending models. So across the continent, yes, there are a number. Some of the top tier banks in Kenya are using some of those models. We've been very fortunate to work alongside one of Kenya's largest banks in the very early days when they were just figuring out the market. We handheld them, capacity built them, taught them about product development, showed them the opportunities for digital, and helped them get into that agenda. And we have colleagues across our business too who specialize in digital transformation. So those models work, and we've seen them work in Kenya, we've seen them work in Ethiopia, we've seen them work in every part of the world that we're in. And it's really exciting when we see credit being unlocked to a consumer for the first time, them getting their first loan, then being able to successfully repay their loan and graduate up.
Yeah. And when you look at other SME sector, which sector is regarded as having the highest risk when it comes to accessing credit?
Very good one. So most of the Kenyan MSMEs are in the retail space. So those, if you can demonstrate some fair level of liquidity, you will get a loan. Yeah. And if your business is well understood with your financial institution, you will be able to obtain credit. So there are smaller sectors, fisheries, mining, that we have MSMEs playing, but because we don't quite understand what they're doing, it's harder for them to get a loan. So let me give you an example. I'm an SME, I walk into a big financial institution, I say, you've never met me before, I say I want to open a business in Turkana to help the companies that are in Turkana who are drilling for oil, and I need $5 million to set up the business and buy the equipment to maintain those machines. Very likely you'll be laughed out of the room and be told, you first go secure a tender, go do this, go get a sponsor. You'll be given a whole list of requirements. And so, part of what we are saying is, if we understand the sectors in which they're in, if we can make deliberate connections, and the question is, whose role is it? Is it the MSME? Is it the government? Is it a development partner? But I think what we need to be mindful of is we need to create those connections so that the sectors that are not well understood are understood. There was a time, if you wanted to get money, let's say to open a retail shop to sell Omo and Kimbo, you couldn't get that money because the banks then didn't understand what is Omo, what is Kimbo, will you be able to repay the loan, forget it. So back then, Unilever today, which was East Africa Industries then, used to use their own working capital to on-lend to stockists to help them stock. Today, if you walk into any of the big banks and say, I want to stock products for Bidco or for any other manufacturer, Unga, they'll say, hey, fantastic, welcome. Tell us about what you're looking to do. So we need to be deliberate about creating those connections, those relationships, but also understand that it takes time.
And which sector carries the lowest risk?
It's a very good question. I'm curious if that actually has been studied, and I'd love to research on that and come back to you. But I think the sectors that would generally carry less or least risk are those that are best understood. So I've given an example of retail where we know what's happening, especially fast-moving consumer goods. Those generally tend to be easier, in quotes, easier to apply and get loans because people understand the product you're selling, they understand the market, they know there's proven demand. Sectors where that's not quite clear, we have challenges. And so I think that's the point that I'm making of being able to understand the sector, because today it might be mining that is risky, or forestry, or agrofisheries. But for example, with agrofisheries, it might be risky to us in Nairobi, but down by the coast, people understand that industry. And maybe for them, agrofishery isn't risky at all. Yeah.
Very good. Well, if you're just joining us, we are having a very interesting conversations on how to de-risk the SMEs industry in Kenya. They are regarded as highly risky when it comes to lending by more so by commercial banks, and so even when they qualify for credit, they are priced differently. For example, if you, as an individual, you want to apply for a personal loan, and on the other hand, you have an SME who wants to apply for a business development loan, then you find that you pay the SME will pay more for the credit, probably maybe by about 4 percentage points than you. And so the question that we're asking here is then, how do we lower the risk profile of SMEs in this country? And we're having this conversation with Kim Kariuki. He's a consultancy expert and he works with Microsafe Consultancy. He's here in studio. He's helping us to understand this concept. And so if you are an SME, I think that the next question is going to be very, very helpful to you, because I want to find out from Mark. Then as an SME, then how do you fashion yourself in a manner that, you know, your loan what do we call this?
Your loan limit.
Application.
Loan application.
Your loan application will be favored by commercial banks. How do you do that?
Very good question. I think the first starting point really has to be you as an SME owner. How do you present yourself? So you've talked about, you know, personal loans being cheaper than business loans, and to some extent that is very true, and that's the lived experience of many people. But then it's also about that lending officer probably understands the product that he's offering to you as an individual better than he understands the business that you're trying to get into. So I'll give you an example. If I come to a financial institution and I say I want to buy a car, it is X KDF 123X, here's all the paperwork. The financial institution has already developed mechanisms around verifying the seller, verifying the logbook, making sure the taxes are paid. So really all he's trying to see is, do you have matching income that can meet whatever minimum repayment is here? And of course, I'm oversimplifying the credit administration process. He's trying to check, are you able to repay? And if not, can I sell the car if you're not able to? And that's a match made, there you go. Right? Now, when it's a business, the conversation is slightly different. So I need to understand you as a business owner. I also need to understand your business. Who are you dealing with? Are you supplying to entities that pay you? How often do they pay you? Have you had any business disruptions? Have you filed for bankruptcy? So the due diligence that the financial institution has to do for an entrepreneur and their business increases. So because of that increase, and now we're talking about, you know, certificates of good conduct, verifying registrations. There's a lot of back-end administration work that now needs to happen just to accompany this loan appraisal. So that automatically adds a premium onto the loan. But with digitization, you know, we could bring that down. But to your question of how do I present myself as an MSME, I think it's you knowing your business, you demonstrating your own personal character, and the government has done a good job of ensuring that the credit reports are available and accessible, so even as an entrepreneur you can see how you're rated, but also your business, because the institution has to buy both you and your business. Does your business have positive cash flows? Does it have a potential for positive cash flows? Does the financial institution have a relationship or a history with you? So there is an opportunity as well to start cultivating relationships with the financial institution. I think sometimes we go in naively thinking you'll walk into a financial institution and walk out with a 10 million shilling loan and you're happy to go about your business. In truth, it might not work that way. Mm-hmm. You might need to start with something small. So adjust your expectations with the reality of your business and grow with the financial institution. So many of the financial institutions today that enjoy repeat business from their customers, from their SME customers, and most financial institutions are exceedingly happy to lend to an institution that they know. And so if they've built trust with the financial institution, you as an MSME have built trust with them, they have built trust with you, you find loan limits, your loan approvals tend to be faster than, if someone is just walking into the institution on day one and expecting a huge loan.
Mm-hmm. And also, I also understand that, the SMEs that are lent by men, they stand a higher chance of accessing credit as opposed to SMEs that are led by women. Is this true? And if this is true, then how do you address that imbalance?
So, it's interesting. In my past life, I used to work for a microfinance institution. And it's interesting, that's 10 years ago until today, the rhetoric is still the same. Women are better repayers of money. Especially individuals, they're better repairs. They have larger social networks to leverage from, they are more responsible, they are more truthful, and so that has been a consistent path. I think the access to credit for entrepreneurs, I think unfortunately is still pegged on availability of assets. What do you bring to the table? What do you have to offer? And I think unfortunately we're not at that point where we have gender parity in what women and men can bring to the table, or even in their knowledge of what is required and what they can ask for.
Mm-hmm. And so how do we rebalance that gender inequality in terms of access to credit?
Sure. So I know I've spoken digital a number of times, so I'll repeat that just for this one point, is that if done well, digital is unbiased. Mm-hmm. So part of the other thing that happens is, it's very likely, and there are studies that have been shown, if you are a male credit officer appraising a loan, you may appraise a man or a woman client differently. So I think with data, there's an opportunity to de-bias the information that's being appraised. So both men and women have a chance of getting an equal access to credit. I think for our sisters out there running businesses and they are thriving, I think my message to them is keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. It's what you tend to find is some of these things end up being industry corrections. Mm-hmm. So over time, and I think we're at that tipping point now where people are realizing, wait, women-led enterprises are doing well. We've seen a number of financial institutions creating specific value propositions just for women, and it's not just in Kenya, it's in Uganda and it's across. We've seen funders coming in strongly and saying we want to support women. We've seen the World Bank giving money specifically and other large donors to women-supported enterprises. So I think it's a correction that is happening. But we need to be mindful, or financial institutions and borrowers need to be mindful that, what's at play ultimately is the value that you're creating to your customer. So if the women entrepreneur can demonstrate that she's providing great value for her customers and she will be able to repay her loan, any financial institution will pick her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a report that was done about 5-6 years ago by Financial Access, and they were saying that out of 10 SMEs or startups, 5 will have closed their business by the time they celebrate their third anniversary. The number will increase to 7 by the time they are clocking their 5th anniversary or their 5th birthday. And the number is likely to go up to around 8 or 9 by the time they're celebrating their 10th anniversary. And so you, as a lender, then you have to be very cautious about, who you lend to, because, banks are not in the business of throwing away their cash. They're in the business of selling money. And so then how then do we structure our SMEs and we prime them for success?
Absolutely. I know it's interesting you said that about banks. Even SMEs, they're not in the business of, hey, let's open a business today, and let's go through, and then you close. It's crazy. So I think it starts off with, you talked about birthdays, and I think I saw that report, and I think the situation got worse with COVID because COVID threw those statistics out the window. But I think it starts with helping us first take a step and appreciating what banks are now beginning to understand is that there's a graduation process. You can't take an 18-year-old who's just gotten their ID, very excited to use their phone, and give them a large credit limit. They likely will not repay.
Yeah.
So similarly with MSMEs, we need to graduate them. In their first year of business, what do they really need? Yes, capital will be important because they have to pay their bills, they have to keep the lights on, etc. But they might need a lot more technical assistance, maybe access to markets. They might need a lot of business linkages to survive that first period. Just like when a child is born, I love my daughter, but when she was young, there was no way I could feed her ugali or anything else I was eating. Mm-hmm. We had to take all that food, mash it down, and hope she will eat it without throwing it off on our faces and do other things. So we need to take the building blocks of what we know it is required for sustainable business, access to markets, business linkages, business training, credit. We need to take these things and break them down and allow the MSMEs to graduate over time. So, those early businesses, and there's been work done by a number of foundations that are working in the entrepreneurship space, and they've seen, as MSMEs are in their first pivotal space, yes, credit is important, but they need to understand other things even more important, like their access to market, their value proposition. They need to understand pricing, their administration, because all of these are in flux. Someone can come and steal from the business. They're still trying to figure out their systems. As the business becomes a bit older, say from that 3-year period to 5-year period, it's not like this child, it's running around, doing everything, breaking things. You now need to start giving that MSME what they actually now need at this point, which is, yes, still a fair bit of TA and market linkages and helping to build their resilience is really what I'm driving at, but also injecting the right sorts of capital. Because we've also seen MSMEs fail because they get too much capital too fast, and that perhaps is a story for another day. So I think we need to understand the graduation. We need to understand that these MSMEs from day 0 to year 7 need different things along the way, and consistently have to keep refining their product development. So when they get to that acceleration stage, the capital will come because they can demonstrate the customer base, they can demonstrate the product, and they can demonstrate the value.
Mm-hmm. Kim, if you were to get into the SMEs world, which sector of the economy would you focus on?
Very good one. So in my own private enterprise, I consider myself a nano entrepreneur. So in my nano entrepreneur,
what is that?
Smaller than micro.
Yes,
so
smaller than
micro.
So you're smaller than micro.
Yes.
Then,
So think of me as a sole proprietorship. Let's use that word. Mm-hmm. So in that business, I rear chicken. And it's very fulfilling watching the chicken running around, but my scale is too small. Mm-hmm. So that even if I slaughtered all these chicken, I wouldn't even be able to pay the electricity bill. Yeah. So my monthly electricity bill, and that's another story for another day. But each entrepreneur has their own journey. So rather than making a recommendation,
but in that case, are you in it for business or for fun?
So that's the point, and I think that's where the heart of the matter is. So I consider myself an entrepreneur, but so does the person who considers themselves an entrepreneur who has 100 chicken, 1,000 chicken, right? So the two of us, if we both go to a financial institution and say, hey, we want a loan, we may both be declined, but if there was a degree of declining, mine would be declined the first one. Yeah. So I think it is, rather than making a recommendation on which sector to go into, because they all have, it's a demand and supply issue. So you remember a few years back, we had this phenomenon for quail. So farmers were told, hey, quail is where the market is, and everyone diverted everything and went to quail, and then that collapsed. Similarly, a few years ago, there was no money in coffee, so people uprooted their coffee bushes and put expensive real estate, went into other things, and then now coffee is making a comeback. So I think aside from thinking about which sector has money, I think we should think about which problem can I solve for which customer. It sounds generic, but ultimately it goes back to the same thing. Like with me as my nano entrepreneur, if I thought of myself as these 3 chicken have to pay the light bill, then my focus has to change. I have to think about either increasing the chicken or reducing the amount of feed I'm giving the chicken, or maybe not have them roaming around everywhere. Let's maybe put them in a battery cage. A shift has to happen for me to actually get to the goals that I want. So I think for the opportunistic entrepreneurs or for people just starting out in business and they want to make it, we all want to reach those high levels. I think it really starts off with us having an honest and candid conversation about what do we have, what can we do, what does it take, because, you know, like I said, we are in this space right now where there's a lot of attention to entrepreneurship by the government, by the private sector, by donors, and, you know, the digital tools now are making credit accessible, affordable, and convenient. So there's really no need for us to be limited by sector, by, oh, this has money or this other thing doesn't have money. It's a question of how can I add value. For example, with my 3 chicken, if I said, you know, I'm keeping them for beef and I'm keeping them for for chicken, I'm keeping them for meat and I'm keeping them for eggs, how about I just keep layers? That would just give myself a lot more focus and help me scale that business faster. Yeah. So I think it's a question of, you know, entrepreneurs also sometimes in the early stage try to do a lot because you're not sure which will work. So you try 10 things and there's no focus. So then that's what we're talking about, the need for that focus, that dedicated value chain development, that access to business linkages to actually focus and say, okay, I'm going to produce eggs for this market that will be bought at this price, and so this is my cost.
There's also this phenomenon in Kenya whereby a lot of SMEs, you know, they are into copy and paste kind of a business model whereby Kim is doing very well in the pottery business. And so I imagine if I get into it also, you know, I'm also going to make money. I'm going to make some good bucks out of it. Kim has started a boutique in downtown Nairobi and is getting enough customers. And so I, as O'Brien, I just copy that business model and I paste it, hoping that it will work. Is this the case, honestly?
You know, it's an interesting one. It's true, a rising tide does lift all boats. Yeah. So there is a strong advantage actually in copying, because when you think about it, if there are 10 boutiques and I'm the 11th one, I might not struggle to look for people who can run the front office. I can poach from the 10. I might not struggle to find the latest hairstyles. I can see what is happening in the remaining 10. So somehow my cost of doing business has reduced just by replicating what's in the market. But I don't think that's long term. So it will get you in, it might not keep you in. So I think that's the problem. People are coming in because they can see, oh, the cost of entry here is low, let me jump in. But because of lack of diversification, innovation, and a clear value proposition, why should a customer come to boutique number 11 and not boutique number 2? You know, we all suffer because we dilute the market, and then it's not sustainable for any one of us. So I think get in, but think about how you differentiate yourself.
And so for SMEs, before you decide that this is the market that I want to focus on, this is the area that I want to venture into, what are some of the factors that you have to consider?
Yeah, I did a bit of economics in my early days, and for me now, the thing that keeps ringing back to my mind is, what is the cost of doing business and what's your business plan? So I had a conversation with my partner this morning and we were discussing different business ideas. And, you know, one thing at least I shared with her and said, you know, one thing that it might be important to think about is, what is your route to market? So if you take your capital, if you borrow money or get a loan from an informal money lender or from your indigenous financial service provider, and then go and open up shop and hope that customers will stream in, they don't know you, they don't know your product, that's a tough sell. However, what we're seeing in South Africa and other places where this is working is people are leveraging more tech, leveraging working from home arrangements, working mainly online on Instagram, Twitter, what have you. And it's a trend that's we're also seeing here. So as a way to get to your customer quickly, lower your cost of entry, and improve your chances of success. So that once you have a stable customer base that might not be giving you full return on investment, but at least it's on its way, then you can open for them a shop. But not necessarily opening a shop to hope the customers will come. And I think sometimes we put the chicken before the egg because we have a prestige on, oh, I want a shop here, and so I put a shop and then I start selling. It really should be, what do people want? How can I get that to them? Is the shop the best way to get that to them, or is there a different way? And it's great to see that we're in this space now where digital is enabling all of these things to come to bear.
And before I let you go, Kim, also help us understand, I mean, how then, as an SME, how do you leverage on IT, number one, to drive your business, number two, to make yourself more credit worth, and number three, to remain in business?
Sure. I think to make yourself more credit worth, there are a number of different applications by fintechs, by large commercial players that will allow you to record your sales, that will allow you to keep track of your Chama investments that you're receiving, that will give you a bit of traceability. So when you approach a financial institution, you can show that you have credit history. As well, to get to market, so I came across two very different platforms but are doing the same thing, one in Pangani, one in Pumwani, that are making it possible for even mama mbogas to sell online without even having to know how to code or what is online. So looking at linkages to platforms such as these that can expand your potential to market and your route to market. And then I think, you know, ultimately it goes back to what value are you driving and how are you differentiating yourself. Because if you are the 101th mama mboga, you have it's a blessing and a curse. Blessing because you can innovate, and maybe a curse because you're finding an already established market.
Very good. I mean, we're in this conversation of you know, how to make SMEs, you know, credit worth, and we're having this conversation with Kim Karaoke. He's a consultant working with a Microsave consultancy. Time now for us to fly down to the county of Kilifi and now link up again with our reporter Junei Karisa. She has been tracking the Shakahola tragedy. She's now at the Malindi Hospital. And now she's about to give us the latest. We were with her in about 30 minutes ago, and now she's back on the screen again. Thank God it's not raining, and now she's under the tent. June, thank you very much indeed, and of course for braving the morning chill to be with us here. I know it has been an onerous task, but thank God you're up to the task. So what do you want us to know at this point?
O'Brien, as you have rightly put it, we are bracing the weather to give you more updates on the Shakahola massacre. The current update right now is that Pastor Ezekiel Odwor, who is a televangelist also and an evangelist for the New Life Center in Mavueni, Kilifi County, has been arrested by officers of the DCI. He is currently at the headquarters in Mombasa, and he is being questioned. He is accompanied by his lawyer, and from there he is, according to the police, they visited the Milele Funeral Mortuary. It is right in Kilifi, a few kilometers from the New Life Center. They claim that many deaths have been reported from that have been resulted from his church. So the DCI detectives yesterday, as they concluded the evidence in Milele Mortuary, they went ahead to arrest Pastor Ezekiel Odor. On top of that, they have closed down that church. He raised a massive church. This is a church that was headquarters previously in Shanzu in Mombasa County. He later moved on to Mavueni, where he's currently on a very big acre of land, and that is where he has been conducting his services. He has a massive following, not here in Mombasa, but across the country and the world as well. People coming in their numbers to just get a message of hope from Pastor Ezekiel Odor. He is not, he is a familiar face and a familiar name in the religious sector. And from there, of course, we will be getting more details as to what the DCI detectives have been able to unearth, and that is in Mombasa. My colleague Anburu is following up on that bit. But we are in Malindi, and we are at the Malindi mortuary. We are still still waiting for direction from the forensic experts as to when the autopsy procedure is supposed to start. We understand that the DNA it was supposed to start immediately. They had received the mobile morgue for the bodies that are lying here. Remember, the number is up to about 98 bodies that have been recovered. So the families are supposed to provide DNA materials so that they can be able to identify but this is a process that will take time, like 3-4 weeks, for them to get conclusive results as to who exactly is lying, the bodies that are lying behind me in the mortuary. I understand, O'Brien, before I speak to a victim, do you need any clarification?
Oh yeah, that's right. I mean, by the time we went to sleep, that was last night, the number of bodies that have been exhumed so far were about 98. And now you're talking about almost 10 hours later, depending on what time you went to sleep. Do we have more bodies that have been recovered or that have been exhumed?
I slept at 1 o'clock. It's 100 kilometers from here, from Malindi. Yesterday the number was 98. Now the RC, when she was doing the briefing, she gave us a figure of 5, while our colleagues who were here at the mortuary confirmed the number to 8. So as the process continues, that was about 3 o'clock. So as the process continues, more bodies are being retrieved. Now, just to give you what exactly is happening on ground today, when the exhumation process started 6 days ago, they earmarked 35 individual singular graves. However, as they were continuing, they discovered mass graves across the 800 acres. And these graves, this operation moved to the mass graves. And now we have concluded that process together with, we were together with the officers. Now they have moved to the individual graves. Those are 35. Remember, O'Brien, put to mind, Pastor Paul Mackenzie was arrested because he owned allegations of 2 children who had died under his religious ideologies. Now the police is yet to exhume these 2 bodies to prove that these children indeed died under his doctrines, under his leadership. So the police are really making inroads to ensure that they retrieve those 2 bodies. At first we are told that beginning January they were burying people deep within deep graves, but right now because of the number of people that were dying, for a lot of people were dying, they just dug shallow graves and buried them there. So right now they are doing the 35 graves. If you could allow me, it's a very traumatic state for the families here. I'm joined by one. She's looking for her sister. She's here all the way from Kitui with her mother and other relatives too, in search of their relatives. They have done some minor procedures. She's just going to give us an update. Hi, Winnie. Hi. What's going on and how are you faring on, and what are the steps that have been done, you have done as a family? Unaweza ongea hata Kiswahili?
Okay, kufikia hapo tulifika hapa kitu kama saa 3 hivi, saa 2 tukapita kwa polisi, tukaelekezwa kwa Red Cross, then kutoka kwa Red Cross tukaelekezwa hapa hospitali hapa mortuary. Then when we reach here, tumeambiwa tuache statement kuhusu sistangu. Tumepeana majina, tumepeana pia majina yetu ya mamangu pia yangu. Then after that tukaambiwa tutaonyeshwa wenye wako hai, wenye wako at least wanaweza ongea, ndio tujue kama tutamuona pale. But unfortunately hatujamuona.
Mara ya mwisho kuongea naye ilikuwa ni lini?
Okay, the last time kuongea naye ilikuwa Feb. Kutoka that time hatujaongea naye, hatujui yuko wapi.
Alinaelezewa alikuwa amenunua kipande cha ardhi kwa shilingi 2,000. Je, mlikuwa mnajua? And did she put a distress call to you so that muweze kumsaidia?
Okay, she told us that kwamba wamekatiwa vipande, kila mtu sehemu kidogo, kila mtu aweze kujijengea, na alikuwa anapiga simu kutuitisha pesa kidogo za matumizi na za chakula. So kufikia Feb hajapiga simu tena.
Tunatakia, I'll allow you to compose yourself, pole sana, as you continue with the search of your relative. We are at the Kenya Red Cross tent. Just a minute, Mugo, karibu sana. I understand rescue operations are going on. You're mapping out places so that you can rescue victims from the forest. It's been a tiresome process. Understand you're flying drones. How is that operation going on?
Sorry, we are not...
Please start with your name and your title.
Okay. My name is Hassan Musa. I'm the regional manager for Kenya Red Cross. And again, today we are embarking still to the operation of rescuing victims of this Shakahola. And as we speak today, we've registered here over 360 people. That's as of a few minutes ago. And out of this 160 are children below 18 years of age. So that gives almost 50% of the total number of missing people, reported missing people being children. As Kenya Red Cross, we've actually supported the county government because they had a problem here in terms of capacity of mortal remains. The capacity could not take the number that they have. So we've supported them with a container that is able to take over 300 mortal remains. And again, apart from that, we are actually working very closely with the government and national government to rescue those who are still in the bush and take them back. Take them to the facility here at Malindi District Hospital.
Allow me, the number of exhumation is increasingly, every day is increasing, but the number of rescue is dragging a bit. What could be the reason?
I don't know the reason. I think because you see, when we are talking about the field work, it's not something that you can expect to get things as you plan. But we are optimistic that with operation and going on now, will be, if there are people in the bush, then we should be able to rescue them. And that is the exercise we are doing together with other partners. Yes.
Thank you so much. We will be here with you the whole day just to give us more info from the ground. O'Brien, I am leaving you with the parting shot that religion doesn't necessarily have to be a cult. People have to be mindful of what they are following. I'm sure, Brian, you also have to pray to Jesus, and I'm sure you're not following other doctrines and ideologies that might lead you astray. So from the Malindi mortuary, we are going to give you another comprehensive report at 1 o'clock during the bulletin. But for now, O'Brien, if there are no further questions, I hand it back to you.
Very good. Judy, the fact of the matter is, I could spend the whole afternoon with you there, just to try to find out, how the situation is and how the family members are coping, and even how the folks down there from Red Cross, as well as, security officers, are coping with this situation, because it's for sure can be overwhelming. I'm still with you. And so I pray to God that you're okay, and you're doing a good job. Keep on updating the nation, because that is why we are here. You're doing a great job, and we appreciate you, and we applaud you. We'll be linking up with you later on in the afternoon. Otherwise, stay safe down there. That's Junie Karisa. He's our correspondent or reporter who is following up on the issues around the Shakahola massacre. I want to tell you things. If you ever thought that journalism is an easy cause or is an easy calling, then you got it twisted. You know why? Because we all go down the murky lanes to get you the best stories. And so you've just seen our reporter there. She has been in that village, and I'm telling you, it is one of the remotest parts of this country. It is about 100 kilometers from Malindi town, and for you to get even a cell phone network, you really have to climb a tree. It's that serious. And you also, if you want to appreciate, the kind of assignment that police officers are going through, this Shakahola land is about 800 acres. If I can help you put this into perspective, it's about 3.27 square kilometers. Yeah, and it's bushy. There's some parts with the forest. And if you want to put this into meters, you multiply that by 1,000, and so you're talking about 3,200 meters. How many football pitches are those? I leave you to do the mathematics. We are coming to the end of this conversation. I don't want you to ask. I just want you, Kimani. I mean, Kimani karaoke, not Kim.
There we go.
Yeah. Your message for the folks down there, from Red Cross, our reporter June Carissa, the security officers, and the people that are involved in this onerous task of ensuring that we bring this issue to a close. What is your message to them?
So, first off, it's a tragedy, and our hearts and minds are with the people of Shakahola, their families, and like you rightly said, we do not take for granted what it takes to go down and collect those stories. So our prayers and our thoughts are also with the brave women and men who are going out there to look for any rescuers and to bring us the stories. We really applaud you, and we thank you for your service.
Kim Karaoke.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time this morning. And of course, now it's 10 minutes past the hour of 12 o'clock. Tamarini is coming up next with her lead. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you for your time. We've been with you for the last 2 hours. It's a beautiful time with you. Have yourself a good afternoon.
It is one of the oldest competitions in football history, the DFB Pokal. Catch all the high-tempo fun, the cheers and tears as football made in Germany comes to you live on KBC Channel 1.
Gorgeous little flick from Mario Götze. Let's in Kimani to score his 4th in the competition this season.
Why bet